today we are talking about predatory publishers and predatory publishing. So predatory publishing, just to give a definition to begin, is an exploitative academic publishing business model that involves charging publication fees to authors without checking articles for quality and legitimacy and without providing editorial and other publishing services that legitimate academic journals provide, whether they are open access or not. So today we are discussing how to identify a predatory publisher through resources and tools, as well as how to identify warning signs when publishers contact you directly. So as I mentioned, open access journals can be legitimate, but there is often a misconception where if you're being asked to pay to publish, it is predatory. That is not necessarily the case. There are also predatory publishers who don't ask you to pay, but they are considered predatory for other reasons. So in this workshop, we are going to first talk about open access publishing. So if I'm repeating something that you already know, or you already learned about in a previous workshop, I apologize, but I think it's important to kind of lay the groundwork for what is open access publishing and then why predatory publishers are kind of trying to take advantage of this model. So then we will talk about identifying and avoiding predatory publishers, and I will talk about throughout the workshop in resources to help with evaluating open access journals. And again, as Emily mentioned, if you have questions at any point, please feel free to unmute and interrupt me or put things in the chat, and Emily will be watching the chat for me. So first to begin, we're going to talk about the importance of open access publishing and talk a little bit about what open access publishing is for those who might not know. So again, I might be repeating things that you already are familiar with. So open access publishing is important for our society for purposes of social justice because open access scholarship is scholarship for everyone. If you have access to the internet, you have access to open access published works. Taxpayers pay a lot of money that go to research and publishing. And so we think it is important, and I say we as folks who are in favor of open access publishing. So I don't speak for everyone at Bell Library, I don't speak for everyone at TAMUCC, but open access, people who are in favor of open access, we believe that taxpayers should have the right to read the work that they fund without having to, for example, come to TAMUCC's campus to get access to the journals in which works by our authors on TAMUCC's campus are published. Additionally, open access publishing often allows authors to retain their copyright. So when you write something or you produce music in some way, you own the copyright to your work, but traditional publishing works where often, this isn't always the case and things are changing, but often traditional publishing is where authors agree to sign over their copyright to the publisher when they publish their work with them. And this means that authors, they created the work, but they are no longer allowed to reuse their work in ways that they would otherwise be allowed to do. And this is traditional copyrights. So reusing their work, performing their work, other copyrights. And again, going back to social justice, but also for authors, it is important to be read. It is important for your work to be shared. And so open access publishing guarantees more broad dissemination of your work so that people who are either not associated with institutions or not associated with institutions who are resource rich, they can read your work, which means they can cite your work. And studies have shown that open access articles receive on average 18% more citations. And as Emily mentioned, we are recording and we can also share out the slides as well because there are a lot of links in here that might be of use to people. So just to mention that. Okay, so a few more things to know about open access. Open access often means it is free to read. And like I mentioned, with those copyrights, it is sometimes free to reuse in some cases. But it is not necessarily free to publish. So traditional scholarship or traditional publishers, is where somebody writes an article, for example, publishes it with a journal. They don't get paid for it, but they also do not have to pay to publish, but then readers have to pay. So the library pays a lot of money for our readers, our students, our staff, our faculty, for them to be able to have access to scholarship. What open access does is that, yes, the author has to pay something, or maybe an institution with which the author is affiliated. So TAMUCC might pay for one of our authors to publish open access, but then it is free to read. So anyone with access to the internet can read it for free. There is a high standard of openness. So like I mentioned, predatory publishers are taking advantage of open access because there is this, oh, we can get people to pay us to publish their work and we make a lot of money off of it. So there are ways in which to look at open access publishers and publications to see if they are up to a high standard. The Directory of Open Access Journals, or the DOAJ, has something called the DOAJ Seal of Approval. Not all of the journals that they index have this seal, but this is like the gold standard of open access publishing. And these include things like they are peer-reviewed journals. They have digital preservation plans. So if an open access journal goes out of business, are you still going to be able to access their backlog? Or even if they're continuing to publish, but can you access that backlog in the future? So things like that are things to think about with legitimate open access publications. There is a trend of shorter timelines for publication. The difference between a legitimate open access journal and a predatory journal is probably there's a longer time for open access journals. So we're going to take a look at an email that guarantees that you will be accepted within 24 hours of your submission. And that is not common in traditional publishers. And also sometimes things are published within 24 hours of your submission. So there is no peer review in that case, right? So those are some things to keep in mind. There is also an open access trend of disseminating scholarship that has not been through peer review, but this is not necessarily predatory publishing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. So does anyone have any questions so far? I talked really quickly through that.
No questions in the chat either.
Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit about some more common terms and some differences between green and gold open access. So one of the terms was mentioned on that previous slide about preprints. So when you publish an article, first you submit an article to a journal, and this version of your work is considered a preprint. So you're done with it. You've done all you can do to make it pretty, grammar errors, citations are correct, all of that, and you have submitted it to your journal. COVID is a really good example of the proliferation of using preprints. So yes, we need peer review to evaluate people's work, but if you want your work to be accessible as soon as possible, whether it is COVID-related research, and so you want people to be able to, have access to your research for, how is this virus being spread? How can we create a vaccine as soon as possible? Things like that. You might share your work in a preprint server like Archive or bioRxiv. These preprint servers or preprint repositories do have standards, and they do have criteria for submitting your work. Publishers often want you to tell them that you have put your preprint in a preprint repository or that you plan to, but it is a more accepted model of publishing than it used to be. If you've published something somewhere, it's available somewhere, they don't want to touch it, they don't want to publish it. Aside from COVID, there are fields in which you don't want to be scooped. You want your information to be out there. As soon as you finish your research, you want people to know about it. And so preprint servers are a way of getting the information out there, but you can still go through peer review and publish in a journal for the standard of peer review, as well as you want to publish in a particular journal for that journal impact factor or whatever it may be. So that preprint version might be available before it's officially published, but people can read your work and see what you've been working on. A postprint or an author accepted manuscript is the version of your work that has gone through peer review, but it has not been formatted by the publisher. And so it might not have like the Elsevier, the Taylor and Francis, or the Wiley logo on the PDF. That is the final published version. That's the version you're going to download from the publisher's website, for example. And so when we talk about different versions of open access, that's where those different versions of your work come into play. So one of the models of open access is gold open access. And gold is often pay to publish. So access to content is not charged by the users. The author or the author's institution is charged to publish the work, but then once it's published, it is free to read. Authors, again, retain their copyright. Often, almost always, gold open access is peer reviewed unless it's a predatory publisher. And then again, there is going to be a charge, which is often called an article processing charge. And there are credible and there are non-credible open access journals. So that's the legitimate ones that are probably indexed in the directory of open access journals. And there are the non-credible ones or the predatory publishers. Green open access is another model of open access, but it is not necessarily what we're talking about today because it is not often that you are approached by a green open access repository. It can happen, I'm sure, but if they're not making money, why do they want your work, potentially? So what green open access is often also called self-archiving, where you deposit a version of your work in a repository. So you're not publishing it, you're just kind of archiving it somewhere else. This could be after an embargo period. So depending on your publisher, whether it's a gold open access publisher or a traditional open access publisher, or what's considered a hybrid, which I forgot to mention on the next slide, but we'll talk about that. So a publisher might say you can put a preprint version of your work in the repository so that it is free to read, and people have to subscribe to see that final published version. Often preprints do not require what's called an embargo, which we'll talk about. Postprints sometimes do, and published versions usually come with a fee and an embargo, potentially. Green open access is not peer reviewed, so it is hosting service only. So those preprint services, sometimes they have screening criteria, but they do not have traditional peer review. Access is free. So if you have access to the internet, you have access to the work. And there is the directory of open access repositories. If you are looking for a credible repository for your preprint, maybe that is associated with your field, like archive or bioarchive, for example. So some other common terms, article processing charges. So these are the fees charged to authors to publish scholarly articles. There are fully gold open access journals where everyone has to pay to publish their article, and that is how that journal makes their money. That is how they sustain their website. That's how they pay their editors. Other fees that come with publishing, even if you're publishing in a digital world. There are also hybrid journals. So we've got fully gold and we've got the traditional, where it's fully gold is you pay to publish, fully traditional is you pay to read. So whether that's the library or institution, or you have your own subscription, so like the New York Times, you're paying to read that content. A hybrid journal has a third option where you can pay for your article to be made open access. You might not be able to retain your full copyright, but you can make it so that your article is available for free to read at the point of publication. In the library, we often consider this double dipping because we are paying to subscribe to that journal, and then we are paying potentially for you to publish in that journal. So we're paying them twice. And this is, above and beyond paying your salary to do research, right? So the university, there's a lot going on there, right? And it gets complicated. But there is a difference between a fully gold open access journal that makes money by asking authors to pay the fee, but then it's open for everyone, and traditional journals who have the readers pay for it. And then there's predatory journals, which also ask you to pay money to publish your work, but they're not going through the full peer review process and other things, which we will talk about, I promise. Embargo is another term that we talked about on the previous slide, and this is a publisher. If you publish your work in a traditional journal where it's pay to read it, they might say you can self-archive your work in a green repository, but you can't make it fully available until 12 months after publication or 24 months, and they might stipulate which version you can share in the repository as well. Okay, I've talked about institutional repositories. This is a repository that makes your works openly available. We do not do peer review in institutional repositories. There's also cascading journals where if an article is rejected by one journal, which might have the highest impact factor, they reject it, but they pass it on to another journal. And this is more common in those like huge publishing worlds. It's not great. um, I think that there are like differing opinions, but that is something that is out there. And there's also mirror journals, which is in Europe, there's something called Plan S, which I won't get into, but what Europe is asking publishers to do is transition from pay to read to pay to publish to make things more equitable and more accessible. What a mirror journal does is rather than transition, they just set up the same journal essentially, but it's open access. So everything that they publish in the mirror journal is open access, but the journal impact factor might be different. The peer review process might be different. It might be less competitive to publish in that open access journal. So they're just making money in two different ways. They're making money from authors who want to publish in open access journals, and they're making money from institutions who still want that subscribed to journal as well. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about peer review and pay to publish, we're going to do a little activity. We are going to evaluate the journal ARC, Journal of Immunology and Vaccines. And I have a couple of links to share with you as well, because we have a link to the journal so you can all take a look at it. And then we have a link to a Google Doc if you want to also share your thoughts. So here is a link to that website. And I'm also going to open up the Google Doc. And if you want to unmute and just tell me, tell us your thoughts, we can also do it that way. And there is a link to the Google Doc as well.
Alexa, I got an access denied.
I got a kind of warning, but then I clicked through.
Not for the
Google
first
Doc?
link, for the Google Doc.
Oh,
All
for
right,
the
let me
Google
work on
Doc.
that.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha.
Let me see if I can get the menu to go away. There we go. All right. I do this and I go. Change to anyone with the link.
It might be.
Try this second link.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, we can just talk about it.
That one worked for me. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
So this journal, it looks like it's open access, peer reviewed, scholastic journal, devoted to the incomprehensible.
Yeah, that part looks good, that they subject all of their manuscripts to the same peer reviewing process.
Yeah. And what's the pay online? I guess is that for access to the journal? Requires paper processing charges that will pay by the submitting author. This is suspect. You have to pay. I don't know, it's just.
I think that might just be an APC though. That might be normal.
Okay. Processing charges? Yeah, it says, okay.
It does say that authors get irrevocable rights. So that's a good thing to me. Oh, and it does allow
Yeah.
for derivative works as well. So that all feels good.
Yeah. It has really, yeah, and the instructions on submitting your article are really clear. Because usually, my experience I don't know, Alexa, but the experience is if it's not very well done, the website doesn't have clear information. That's kind of a clue.
Yeah, that's a good point. It
This looks
reads
legit.
professional. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not seeing any like weird formatting or grammatical or spelling errors.
Yeah, that it's this looks legit. Just the pay online was a little alarming at first, but then you see what they explain what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are all great points. Thank you both. Does anyone see any red flags or any additional great things about it? We're going to come back to it at the end too. So we're going to talk now more about predatory publishers and we will come back to reviewing this as well.
It's not indexed anywhere.
Aha! Paulo went rogue. Yes. Okay, so that's a good point. You did your homework, not indexed. And where did you check?
In the indexing link.
Aha. Okay, so when we went to the useful links indexing.
They were Google and site like us, you know, things like that, rather than databases that we're familiar with, like, you know,
That's true, yeah.
or anywhere else that you would normally find a qualified bibliographic database.
Or the DOAJ either doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, or that one either.
Ah, huh.
We got tricked, Tara.
Yes, we did. Well, what's its, yeah, Index Copernicus, where science meets.
Also, does it feel weird that it's asking for the Journal of Immunology and Vaccines to submit the paper you send an email? Does that feel weird? In my head, there would be like a submission form as opposed to just like emailing them.
Yes, so because we haven't really talked about like what, I've talked about a few things, but we haven't really talked about indicators of predatory publishing. So I just kind of asked you like what feels icky or what red flags. So is it weird that you email your paper to someone? That is a really good question. So for the sake of time, if you want to keep looking at this and adding your thoughts to the Google Doc, please feel free, especially as I continue and talk more about some criteria for identifying and avoiding predatory or non-credible publishers. And feel free to ask questions as we continue. So criteria to evaluate predatory publishers, both OWASPA, which I forget what the acronym stands for, but it is open access, scholarly, something, I think, and the DOAJ, which we've talked about, which is the access. critical index for OA journals. Some things that they talk about for criteria to evaluate predatory publishers. Peer review, does it happen? How does it happen? There is a movement in general in scholarly publishing, not just open access publishing, opening up peer review as a conversation. And when I say opening up, traditional peer review is either single anonymous or double anonymous. And this is also sometimes called blind or double blind, which also the language is moving away from for accessibility inclusivity purposes. But peer review is often the author doesn't know who is reviewing their work. And sometimes the reviewers don't know whose work they are reviewing. And this is supposed to help with objectivity. For the author to not have bad feelings towards their reviewers, and if the reviewers don't know who the author is, sometimes, you know, reviewers, if they're reviewing somebody very prominent in their field, they might not want to be too critical, but if they don't know who they are, they might have more objectivity. The problem with anonymous peer review in the past has been people are too mean, and that's very general, but it is that they are not offering constructive criticism. And then there's also an issue of reviewers want the author to cite the reviewer and to get more citations that way. And so there are problems with peer review. It is not a perfect system, but we still use it as a standard. And so I'm probably talking too much about peer review right now, but that is something to keep in mind when you're evaluating any publisher. How does peer review work for them? And as Tara mentioned, the website should be clear about how they run, you know, how is the submission process? How is the peer review? The editorial board is also something you want to look at. Who are their editors? Can you get in contact with them? If you are in a very niche field, does that make sense that they are on the editorial board for this journal? Author fees. The author fees should be made very explicit. It should tell you maybe a range, depending if it's a publisher or the journal itself. You also should not pay to submit. This is another conversation in the field, but for the most part, most publishers that are legitimate will not ask you to pay money until you have been accepted for publication after peer review. Archiving, how does their archiving work? What is their digital preservation? Copyright. Copyright should be made very clear. Do you retain your copyright? What copyrights do you retain? Things like that. How do they handle plagiarism or misconduct? This is another big issue in publishing, in academia, in science, misconduct and plagiarism. Access of the website. So I think Tara mentioned it didn't really want to take her to the website at first, and then it did. You know, how do you access the website? Where is it indexed? Things like that. What are their revenue sources? How do they publish? Do they just, you know, they get an article and they publish right away, or do they follow the traditional issue, volume, etc.? And publishers in general are moving away from this, but they will still tell you, we've accepted it, it's available online, but it's officially published in this journal, volume, issue, etc. Do they state conflicts of interest? And this can be a wide range of things. And of course, I have another page because there are a lot of things to look at. Tara mentioned, is the web page amateurish? Do they send spam emails requesting your research as a leader? And we're going to take a look at some example emails in a little bit. Do they promise fast reviews and guarantee you publication? Do they charge excessive fees? And this is a tricky one because there is a publisher, which is, oh shoot, I think I confused two. There are a couple of publishers that are open access publishers, and they have the DOAJ seal of gold standard publishing, but they charge a lot of money. And there are several reasons for this. So excessive fees it's one of those things where just one red flag might not mean that it is completely illegitimate. But if a lot of these are, you know, if you're looking at something and a lot of these red flags are popping up, it's probably not a great publication. Incoherent scope of journals. So if you don't really know what kind of material they're looking for, what their subject breadth is, things like that. And then again, not transparent about how their processes work, peer review, submission, things like that we've already talked about. Again, inexperienced copy editing and proofreading, do they even offer this? Do they publish without peer review? Do they publish non-academic articles? This is a big one to me. If their contact page is hard to find, who are you contacting exactly? And is it a web form rather than here is the editor's email, things like that. If they use PO boxes and operate out of developing nations, again, there are many open access publishers in developing nations that are of high quality. So just this one thing does not mean that it is a predatory publisher. But if a lot of these add up, it could be not a great journal to publish with. Do they republish work from other places? You would think that wouldn't happen. But people really want to publish they say, yeah, we'll republish that if you pay us some money. So we are going to now go back to our Google Doc, and if we scroll down, we have a couple of emails, and these are actual emails that faculty have received and forwarded on to me. I've taken the faculty's name off of there, but let's talk about what we see in this email. And are there any red flags? So this person from Eliva Press went through Dr. So-and-so's recent publications, and they think it's impressive. That's very generic. They are interested in publishing a book of your works, including this paper. What was one of the things on the slide about republishing of already published works, right? So that's a red flag to me. They specialize in publication and dissemination of academic books. The publication is free for authors. You retain your copyrights and earn up to 50% royalties. In addition, the book will be distributed through Amazon, Lightning Source, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, and more. Do you want to find out more about our services and publishing agreement? So this doesn't actually offer too much information, but they do have a link to their site. And that just a few quick things. So again, this is more about the site itself than the email. But their office address, they don't have a PO box necessarily, but they are in the Republic of Moldova. Schedule a visit. You email a general email address. I went to their services page, and I've visited this page a couple of times, so I'm just kind of quickly going through. If we go to peer review, and this is book publishing, so this might be a little bit different, but you have to pay for peer review, which to me is weird. If you go to their FAQ, there was something in here. How long will it take to publish my book? The whole process can take 1 to 3 weeks. Now, Emily and Tara, I know that you all just submitted a book chapter, and I've also recently submitted a book chapter, and it was due October 1st. We received confirmation from the editor that they had received our book chapter, but that's all I've heard. And that was a month and a half ago, right? So that quick turnaround time is a giant red flag to me. They are doing, ebooks, right, rather than a print book, but that is a giant red flag to me. Did anybody see any other things that they want to point out before we talk about our second email? I'm kind of hurrying through because I want to get back to our original journal to discuss that as well.
50% royalties seems very high, like outrageously high.
And Amazon, I mean, I know that academic textbooks or academic books are sold on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I have not heard of Lightning Source, so I would want to investigate that as well. But what about other book venues, book publisher venues. So yeah, that's a question for me. So this one Emily might recognize because it's a journal for nursing. So in the first paragraph, you might see that Google Docs has so helpfully told me that there are some grammar issues. The second sentence is, International Journal of Nursing and Healthcare Science is committed to publish the highest caliber medical research and getting your work in front of the medical community. Our journal is inviting all prospective research scholars, professors, and students to read and welcoming to submit their quality manuscripts for publication. The second paragraph also says, for this issue, we welcome research paper, review paper, etc. Important information, the latest date for article submission is June 12th. I added this information because I didn't supply this in the Google Doc. This email was received by the professor June 8th, and it was due June 12th. Article acceptance notification with space in 24 no space hours. So grammar issues, and within 24 hours, you will be notified if your article was accepted. That's a huge red flag to me. The article should be submitted through this email. The deadline can be extended. As Emily mentioned on the Journals of Immunology and Vaccine, most publishers have a submission platform of some kind where you create a profile and then you upload your PDF or Word doc or whatever other version, but you're not emailing it to the editor or emailing it to the publisher. You are uploading it and you are filling out probably a lot of information. So these are many red flags to me. And you know, we have a lot of resources where you can, as Paula mentioned, you know, where is the journal index? That is very important. But you can kind of see from the emails that they send you that there are some issues. Now, I don't want to put a blanket statement and say, you know, if a publisher is contacting you directly, it is predatory, because that is not necessarily the case. You know, the book chapter I mentioned that we submitted on October 1st, that came through a listserv email, but it came through a listserv email, right? Call for proposals of journal chapters. I've also seen open access journals in my field publish, you know, send emails on listservs related to scholarly communication, call for journal or call for article submissions, call for editors, things like that. But you're not going to be contacted directly necessarily. Emily, we want you to publish your article with us. It might be a call for proposals that you see on a listserv, right? So it's not just ignore every email, but it's think about how it comes to you and other things. So there are tools and resources to evaluate journal publications. The journal evaluation tool from Digital Commons at LMU is excellent. Think, Check, Submit is also excellent. They have a really quick 2-minute video, and there's also a checklist that they have. These resources are also available on one of our LibGuides, which is a link on a further page, I think. But I want to leave some time for questions and to reevaluate our original journal. So rather than going to those links right now, if you want to go to them, it looks like Emily posted them. Oops. Sorry, I was trying to scroll through the chat and I scrolled through my presentations. Wait, what is happening? Okay, sorry, going back. Okay, so I think I just copied and pasted this slide. I'm sorry, y'all. So if we go back to our Journal of Immunology and Vaccines, something that you might have caught a glimpse of. If you look at, so things that we've talked about, right? It's not indexed anywhere reputable, and there are more. It is submit a paper and then you email someone. That is questionable. they are also publishing out of India, which again, alone is not an issue. But adding up all of these things, it is questionable. So if we look at this introduction, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. If we look at the top here, introduction, this is a screenshot of that page I was just on. Immunology is a branch of biomedical science that covers the study of all aspects of the immune system in all organisms. I don't know why I said organisms like that. It deals with the physiological functioning of the immune system in states of both health and diseases. Malfunctions of the immune system in immunological disorders, the physical, chemical, and physiological characteristics of the components of the immune system in vitro, in situ, and in vivo. Don't know if I pronounced those words correctly. Now, if we Google immunology and we get Wikipedia, and you read the first paragraph that I screenshotted there, immunology is a branch of biology that covers the study of immune systems in all organisms. And it continues, and we see physical, chemical, and physiological characteristics of the components of the immune system.
So it's
go ahead.
Off, totally ripped off. Oh my gosh.
And, you know, if you are very critical of Wikipedia, you might say Wikipedia took it from this journal.
Not likely.
Not likely.
Holy moly.
So yes, if you want to, you know, if you're not sure, if you think, okay, there are red flags, but I'm not 100% sure if this is just like, you know, sometimes they're not indexed in the DOAJ because they're newer and it takes time to get indexed in the DOAJ. It takes time to get indexed in Web of Science. But you can kind of do these, you know, internet investigations. And if you need help, I love doing these. I love being critical of journal publications. As Emily mentioned at the beginning, we have had several either chats or questions come through email or contacting us directly of how do I know if this is a predatory publisher, which is why we're having this workshop this afternoon. So these are some things to keep in mind. Just, you know, check their introduction. And, you know, a journal of immunology and vaccines is very broad in general, right? So it is not a specific, you know, it's a pretty broad topic, is what is. Bye, Paula.
So,
go ahead,
question. Well, so people need to publish to get tenure. Are there those bad actors that will like, I can get a publication? Obviously, their peers are going to know, but anyway.
That is a good question. And I would say probably there are probably those faculty who are desperate and they might take advantage of this. I think that there are also, this is also why journal impact factor is considered for promotion and tenure. Emily and I can both talk about why we don't love journal impact factor or H indices, things like that. But it is, I think that if you, and I could have made this a much longer presentation to talk about, you know, how to find those high impact factor journals or how to find, you know, journals within your field and where they're indexed. We can talk about that as well. But in general, I think that there are more, I think that the predatory publishers are more vicious than bad actors within academia itself. I think I would be more concerned with faculty trying to fake their data and publish it in better journals than just publishing anywhere. But it is a concern, which is why I think a bigger concern for a lot of faculty are, I published in a predatory journal and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What do I do? And that is something that was discussed at the Charleston conference a couple weeks ago. And I don't know if we've encountered that here, but if departments create policies of, you unknowingly published in a predatory journal, do you own up to it? Do you share that information with your department? Do you share that with your committee if you're going up for tenure or promotion? I think that might be a bigger conversation to have, but it is definitely an issue for sure. I've also had someone contact me. I don't think they were actually at this university, but they found me for some reason. They had been listed as an editor on a predatory publisher's website. They had never published with this editor or this publication. And so it's a question of, well, what do you do? And that is where we refer you to the university's legal team, because you can say, take my name down, take my face off of your webpage, but you can also get a legal team involved for a cease and desist kind of thing as well.